Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
Ryan, I didn't promise anything, she said, letting the words linger in the air like a challenge. Her voice was low, as if she already knew I'd ask for an explanation she wasn't ready to give. She stood by the doorway, phone still in her hand, the screen lit with his name. Coach Ryan. The same man she once claimed was just a friendly trainer from her gym. The same man who'd somehow found a way into everything that mattered to me. I remember the moment clearly. The house smelled of stale coffee and that unfamiliar hint of sweat I couldn't identify. There was a cake box on the counter, half open, with bright frosting for our son's first birthday. My gift for him lay wrapped nearby, waiting for someone to say, "Let's celebrate." But she glanced at the box without the slightest flicker of warmth. She was too busy looking at the phone, too busy waiting for his next message or his next call. I spoke to her as though I were speaking into a mirror or a camera, trying to explain my thoughts, trying to record the moment for some future version of myself. But my voice was calm, almost distant. "Tell me what's going on with you two." She let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "You're overreacting," she said, stuffing the phone into her purse. "Don't start again." In that instant, I saw something flicker in her eyes, something that made my gut twist. I'd always been the type to keep my emotions under lock and key, but now that lock rattled. We built a life together. At least I believed we had. And in that silent gap between us, it felt as if every piece of that life were fracturing, turning to shards beneath my feet. I found myself stepping toward the bathroom, shutting the door and catching my own reflection in the mirror. A dull reflection of a man who had everything to lose yet didn't know how it had all come to this. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass, almost hoping it would give me an answer. There was no yelling, no dramatic confrontation, just a sense of slow, creeping disbelief. My reflection looked foreign. And in one tiny moment of madness, I pressed my lips to the mirror, perhaps craving a kiss that wasn't tainted by lies. Because hers felt so distant, so filled with secrets I could barely name. I still hear the soft click of her heels outside the bathroom, then the slam of the front door. She left me standing there with my mouth against my own reflection, with the phone number that flashed Ryan's name. We had a son, a mortgage, a shared closet full of clothing that told a story of normalcy. But that life now felt like a stage set too flimsy to withstand a sudden gust of truth. I turned away from the mirror, swallowed the lump in my throat, and walked back to the living room. The unopened gift for my boy looked mockingly bright, the paper covered in cartoon animals and colorful balloons. A first birthday is supposed to be special, but she had vanished without a word, phone in hand, leaving me with the cold hush of the house. For a few moments, I wondered if I should call her, ask her to come back. But something in her face, something in that phone, held me back, as though I was glimpsing a side of her I never knew existed. Or maybe I'd known it all along but refused to see. I stayed there for a while, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant buzz of traffic outside. The city felt so large, so indifferent, and for the first time, I realized just how lonely a married man can feel in his own home. My eyes drifted to the pictures on the wall. Our wedding photo, smiling relatives. The day we closed on this house. It struck me that life can change in the smallest of ways. First, an unanswered text, a late night at work, a glance that lasted too long. Then it escalates until the changes carve out a place where someone else stands next to your wife, and you're left with a deep, throbbing emptiness. I forced myself to push that emptiness aside long enough to check on our son. He slept peacefully in his crib, little chest rising and falling with each breath. I brushed my hand over his soft hair. This boy was the only real piece of warmth left in that moment. I told myself that whatever was happening between her and Ryan, I couldn't let it hurt him. Even if she was slipping away, even if I was about to lose everything, I had to hold on to fatherhood. I waited for her to return for hours. The day crept by in slow motion. The sun spilled across the hardwood floors, and by the time the shadows stretched across the living room, I knew this birthday would pass without us blowing out candles as a family. Our son woke, hungry and restless, and I fed him, carried him around the living room, tried to sing a lullaby I barely remembered. I kept checking the door, but it remained closed. When she finally did come back, the silence between us was thick and bitter. "Where were you?" I asked her, though my voice came out more like a statement than a question. I can't say I was calm exactly, but I wasn't yelling either. I stood holding our boy, who was half asleep in my arms. She gave me a long, inscrutable look. "I went out," she said. "I needed some air. I thought you'd be fine." "Air," I repeated. "With him." "Stop," she replied, eyes flicking toward our son. "Not now." But not now turned into not ever. Day after day, I tried to talk to her about it, to find some explanation, to figure out what had happened between us. Each time, she deflected. She'd walk away, slam a door, or worse. She'd laugh in disbelief, as if I were making up stories. Her phone would light up, and that name, Coach Ryan, would appear. She might pretend to ignore it if I was in the room, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hand. I became quieter, more distant. She became more defiant, more eager to leave the house. Work trips, late meetings at the office, or sudden errands at odd hours. Our boy still needed caring for, and I stepped in as best I could. The routine fell into a pattern of subdued hostility. She'd come home with that faint trace of cologne on her clothes, a scent that wasn't mine. And I'd lay awake at night, listening to her steady breathing, feeling like she was 1,000 miles away, despite the fact she slept right beside me. One evening, I made a point of finishing my own work early and heading to the gym she used to frequent. She'd stopped mentioning it, but curiosity gnawed at me. The place was half empty, humming with fluorescent lights and the faint clang of weights. A few men and women moved around, but none of them looked like they might be Ryan. Then, near the back, I spotted a tall, muscled figure guiding a client through some shoulder presses. He had a quick smile, an energy that filled the room. People seemed drawn to him. Even from a distance, I could read the name embroidered on his trainer shirt, Ryan. He must have noticed me staring, because he caught my eye and offered a polite nod, like an invitation. I went over, introduced myself under the pretense of asking about membership deals. He shook my hand, gave me the usual sales pitch, but I sensed his professional grin slip a little when I mentioned my wife's name. He recovered fast, though masked whatever flicker of recognition he might have shown. But I saw it. For a second, the corners of his mouth tensed. I left the gym feeling a bitter taste in my mouth, as if I'd just confirmed what I was too afraid to admit. There was an ease in his voice, a certain confidence that said he was used to winning people over, and I felt the uneasy suspicion that he'd won her over. By the time I drove home, my mind was raging with unanswered questions, but I still couldn't bring myself to scream at her or slam my fist on the table. Instead, I put my boy to bed and stared at the reflection of our family photos on the switched-off TV screen. Later that night, she came home, dropping her bag carelessly on the kitchen counter. I heard the faint hiss of the AC turning on, felt the swirl of cold air that brushed past my face, like the room itself was exhaling in tension. Without turning around, she said, "He's just a friend." I realized she must have seen my membership pamphlet from the gym. I didn't say anything. I just watched her, waiting to see if she'd speak again, break the silence, maybe show a shred of honesty. Instead, she walked upstairs. I heard the shower running. My heart pounded with an odd mixture of fury and resignation. I've never been the type to pry or hack into anyone's phone, but that night, I was so close to unlocking hers just to see if my suspicions were true. But a voice inside me whispered, "You don't need to see it written out to know what's happening." I retreated to the bathroom downstairs. The same mirror, the same reflection. A man losing his grip on the life he built. I thought about everything we'd shared. Our courtship, the wedding, the day we discovered she was pregnant. how she'd squealed in excitement. We'd dreamed about raising our child in a bright, safe home. Now that safety felt compromised, corroded by secrets. Something in my chest ached, and yet I couldn't let it out. No sobs, no curses, just a knot of quiet desperation pressing down on me. When the confrontation finally came, it was as if a dam burst. I'd been staying late at work myself, partly from a need to avoid the tension at home, partly from a desire to hold on to some shred of normalcy. But one Friday evening, I wrapped up early to surprise her with takeout from her favorite restaurant, hoping for a calm night together. I parked outside the house, noticing all the lights were off except the one in our upstairs bedroom. That, in itself, wasn't unusual. Maybe she put our son to sleep and was reading in bed. But as I walked toward the front door, I saw a familiar shape through the upstairs window. Tall, muscled, standing too close to the bed. The silhouette of a man, backlit by a soft lamp. Then I heard laughter, muffled by the walls. Her laughter. Low, warm. The sound she used to make with me. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. I stood there on the doorstep, with a bag of lukewarm pasta in my hand, feeling my world tilt. I pushed open the door, and the faint squeak of the hinges felt deafening. Upstairs, I heard a sudden hush. Footsteps. My son's room was across the hall, so I prayed he wouldn't wake up for this. My own pulse throbbed in my ears as I climbed each step, ignoring the logic that told me to back away, to leave, to avoid seeing what I already knew I'd find. I reached the bedroom door and stopped. It was open just a crack. Enough to see him. Enough to see her. They hadn't even bothered to turn off the soft glow of the bedside lamp. His hands pressed around her waist, and from where I stood, I caught a glimpse of her bare shoulder. Her hair spilled over his chest as he bent down to kiss her neck. The scene was painfully, brutally clear. I felt my stomach twist, my throat tighten, and the bag of takeout slipped from my grasp to the floor. No one said anything for one frozen moment. Then she saw me through the half-open door, and I watched panic spark in her eyes. He pulled away, turning. Confusion and something like fear etched onto his face. Or maybe it was annoyance, like he'd been caught in the middle of something he thought he could get away with. I didn't shout or curse. My voice came out hoarse, raw. "Get out. Now." Ryan, the confident trainer, looked at her as if waiting for a signal. She was breathing fast, cheeks flushed, hair disheveled. But she didn't speak. Maybe she couldn't. I could see guilt and defiance wrestling in her expression. Part of me expected her to cry out, to beg forgiveness, or at least to say something that proved we had once been in love. Instead, she just covered herself with the bedsheet and stared at me like I was the intruder. Ryan snatched his shirt from the chair and brushed past me without a word, stepping over the spilled bag of takeout. I heard the front door open and shut. Then came the silence. She didn't move from the bed, but her breathing still trembled. I stood there, trying to form words that might convey the hurt I felt. Some primal part of me wanted to demand, "Why?" Another part just wanted to vanish. But what I said, quietly, was, "Our son is sleeping. Keep your voice down." She swallowed. "Daniel, listen. You said you would never do this," I murmured, half to myself. "You said it was innocent. You said you just needed a friend." That was when she repeated it, the phrase that felt so cold, so final. "I never promised anything." Only this time, she said it in English, her voice breaking on the last word. For a moment, I just stood there, absorbing the weight of that sentence. I never promised anything. Not loyalty, not respect, not love. It was as if the foundation of our marriage dissolved with those 6 words, and for the first time, I truly understood. She had emotionally checked out long before I ever noticed. I didn't reply. I turned and left the bedroom, heading downstairs, stepping gingerly around the box of soggy pasta on the floor. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror, that same reflection, haunted, eyes hollow with betrayal. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. I wanted to break something, but my arms felt limp. So I just stood there, swallowing my fury, compressing it into the tightest possible space in my chest, because I didn't want to wake my boy. He was innocent in all this. If I was going to lose my mind, I refused to do it in front of him. That night, I slept on the couch with a blanket that smelled of baby powder, an old comforter from the closet. The air conditioning hummed relentlessly, making the house too cold. Or maybe I was just numb. My emotions felt stuck behind a wall of ice. She stayed upstairs, and occasionally I heard footsteps, but she never came down to apologize or console me. Instead, I drifted into a restless doze, haunted by the image of them tangled in our sheets. In the morning, I woke to the sounds of my son fussing for breakfast. I forced myself to stand, to stretch, to take care of him. She passed by once, in a robe, hair wet from a shower. We avoided eye contact, as if last night was just a dream we could ignore. Eventually, she left the house without a word, and I fed my boy with trembling hands. Days blurred into weeks. Our marriage was an empty shell. The only thing that kept me going was the responsibility of fatherhood. In front of our son, I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the second she came home or left the room, an icy tension settled. I'd ask something simple, "Will you be home for dinner?" And she'd answer with a shrug. Our life was reduced to awkward silences and small talk about groceries or bills. Late one evening, I decided enough was enough. I found myself in the kitchen, writing a letter on plain paper. It started with hesitant lines, but as I wrote, the words poured out. I told her I was leaving. I told her I was taking back whatever shred of dignity I still had. She might not have promised me loyalty, but I'd once believed in our vows, believed in the future we planned. That dream was gone now, and there was nothing left for me to cling to except my own self-respect. I wrote about how I felt betrayed, how her casual dismissal shredded me every time I saw her phone light up with his name. I wrote that I hoped one day she'd realize what she'd lost. But mostly, I wrote about how I needed to leave in order to save myself, because I couldn't keep breaking piece by piece, night after night, while she flaunted her affair like it was no big deal. When I finished, my hand trembled from the release of tension. It felt strange to see my pain put into words. I folded the paper and left it on the coffee table, right beside a framed photo of the three of us on the day our son was born. I wanted her to find it when I was gone. Let her read it in the silence of an empty house, the same silence she forced me to live in. That same night, I packed a few bags. I took clothes, personal items, the essentials. I looked at the crib, my heart twisting like a knife was lodged in my chest. My boy was already asleep, oblivious to the chaos unfolding in the adult world. A part of me wanted to grab him, hold him, take him with me. But I had no plan, no stable place to go. And the last thing I wanted was to uproot him without being certain I could care for him properly. So, for better or worse, I decided I would leave him behind until I had a stable arrangement. I'd come back for him, or at least fight for custody. But for now, I had to go. I left the house quietly, setting my bag in the trunk of my car. The night sky stretched overhead, empty and dark, not a single star in sight. A cruel reflection of how I felt. I hesitated on the sidewalk, looking up at the dimly lit windows. The living room was dark. She was probably asleep in our bed, that same bed she'd shared with him. I swallowed hard, feeling the bitterness coil in my stomach. Then I slid into the driver's seat and pulled away, leaving behind the only home I'd known for years. For a while, I just drove aimlessly. The city lights blurred as I passed through empty intersections. I replayed every moment in my head, her phone lighting up with his name, the look in her eyes when I caught them, the sour smell of a betrayal that lingered in the sheets. My mind felt like a spinning carousel of images I couldn't unsee. Eventually, I checked into a modest motel on the edge of town. The neon sign blinked in the darkness, reflecting off puddles in the parking lot. I carried my bags inside, flicked on the harsh overhead light, and stared at the tacky floral bedspread. Then, Exhaustion took over. I sank onto the bed and let the tears come, silent and raw, as if they'd been waiting for the moment I was truly alone. Somewhere in the background, a muffled television played from the next room. Laughter, commercials, bits of dialogue from a late-night show. None of it felt real. I pressed a pillow over my face to stifle any sound I might make, to keep the shards of my pride from scattering. Eventually, I drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of nothing and everything all at once. When I woke, rays of early sunlight were creeping through the broken blinds. My chest felt tight, my eyes gritty. I got up and splashed water on my face in the dingy bathroom sink, staring at the man looking back at me. Haunted, unshaven, older than his years. It was time to figure out a plan. But first, I called the house. She didn't pick up. I tried again, letting it ring until the voicemail clicked on. All I wanted was to check on my son. Hear his cooing in the background, maybe reassure myself that she hadn't run off with Ryan and taken our child God knows where. But all I got was the same mechanical voice telling me to leave a message. I hung up, frustration burning my throat. Over the next few days, I juggled work and motel living. I emailed a lawyer, quietly inquiring about the steps to formalize a separation or a custody arrangement. I wasn't sure if I was ready for divorce, but the logical part of me knew that trust was gone, maybe forever. Meanwhile, I visited a small apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and had a short-term lease available. I signed the paperwork, telling myself this was the start of a new chapter. I avoided telling anyone at the office the full story. When people asked if everything was all right, I just said we were going through a rough patch and left it at that. The old me would have swallowed his pride, tried to fix things. But I was done living in illusions. One late afternoon, my phone buzzed, and I saw her name on the screen. My heart lurched. I quickly stepped out to the parking garage to answer in private. "Hello." Her voice was guarded. "So you're gone?" she asked. "You left me a note." I said nothing at first. I let the echo of the garage surround me. "Yes," I finally replied. "I couldn't stay." "You?" She hesitated. "You left your son." I felt that sting. "I never wanted to leave him," I said, voice trembling. "But I had no choice. I have nowhere to take him yet. I'll figure that out soon. I want to see him." She was silent for a few seconds. "You can see him," she said flatly. "But I won't let you just walk in and out of his life whenever you feel like it." Those words triggered a flare of anger. "You have no right to question my commitment to him," I said, forcing my voice not to rise. "I love him. I will always love him." She exhaled on the other end. "Then prove it." I almost laughed at the irony. "How would you like me to do that?" "By pretending your affair never happened. By accepting Ryan as the new fixture in our home. I saw you. Don't forget that." Her silence told me everything. She couldn't argue, couldn't lie. Maybe a part of her was relieved it was all out in the open. We hung up with no resolution, just a vague plan that I could visit our son if I called ahead. My frustration simmered as I walked back to my desk. That night, I typed a message to Ryan. He had given me his business card that day in the gym when I pretended to be a prospective client. The idea of contacting him felt repulsive, but I needed to set things straight. I wrote, "Ryan, this is Daniel, Evelyn's husband. I'm sure you know I've left. But don't think for a second I'm going to vanish from my son's life. You can have her if that's what she wants, but stay away from my child. I'll fight with every legal tool I have if I see you trying to replace me. Understand?" I hit send and felt a wave of nausea, as though I'd stooped to a level of confrontation I never wanted. But part of me needed to make it clear. My son was off limits. Days turned into a week. I focused on moving into the new apartment and scheduling a visit with my little boy. My anger boiled under the surface, but I learned to swallow it. I had no interest in punishing her legally, no interest in making a scene that would harm my child. I just wanted a clean break and the freedom to be a father on my own terms, When the day came for me to see him, I drove to the house, heart pounding. I parked in the driveway, noticing her car. No sign of Ryan's. I knocked, and she opened the door. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept well. The atmosphere between us was thick with unspoken words. "Come in," she said quietly. I stepped inside, half expecting to be ambushed by confrontation. But the living room was empty. Toys scattered on the rug, the aftermath of a toddler's day. My son peeked out from behind the couch, recognized me, and toddled forward on unsteady legs, arms extended. My heart melted. I scooped him up, pressing my face against his soft cheek. He smelled of baby lotion and cereal, a reminder of simpler times. She lingered by the kitchen counter, watching us. For a few minutes, I tried to pretend we were still a family, at least enough to give our boy some peace, but the tension was impossible to ignore. Finally, I settled him with some blocks on the floor and turned to her. "Thank you," I said, "for letting me see him here." She crossed her arms. "Don't make me into some villain. I'm his mother." I forced myself to remain calm. "I'm not accusing you of anything regarding him. It's between us, not him." She fiddled with the edge of her shirt, glancing away. "I found your letter," she murmured. "You really mean it? You're done with me?" A bitter smile tugged at my lips. "You were done with me first, remember? You might not have said it out loud, but your actions spoke pretty clearly." She closed her eyes for a moment, and I sensed a pang of regret. "Things got complicated," she said. "I never wanted to break everything." "But you did," I replied softly. "Now I have to rebuild." She looked at me then, and for a fleeting moment I saw the woman I fell in love with, the one who smiled at me across a diner table years ago, her eyes bright with hope for the future. But that vision vanished quickly. "What now?" she asked. I glanced at our son, who was busy stacking blocks. I kept my voice steady, the calm tone of a man whose heartbreak had turned into quiet resolve. "I want shared custody. I want to be his father, not a visitor. I'll work with lawyers if I have to, but I'd rather we keep things civil. As for us, you're free to do whatever you want. You've made your choice." She didn't contradict me. She didn't beg or apologize or lash out. She just turned her face away, as though looking me in the eye would be too much. Maybe she felt guilt or shame or neither. But I realized something vital in that moment. I'd given her everything, and she no longer cared. That knowledge freed me in a strange way. It hurt, but it also let me see the path forward. I played with my son for another hour, savoring the feel of his small hand clutching mine. When it was time to go, I kissed him goodbye, promising to see him soon. She stood by, her expression guarded. I wanted to say something, maybe one last attempt at closure, but I held my tongue. There was nothing left to say. Walking out that door felt final, like crossing a boundary between my old life and the uncertain future waiting for me. My heart twisted, but a surge of determination steadied me. I drove back to my new apartment, parked, and climbed the stairs to the small living room with barely any furniture. I set my keys on the counter. The silence was unfamiliar, but it wasn't suffocating. It was my space now, free of her lingering shadows and the weight of her betrayal. It occurred to me that I might never again share the bed we bought together, never again wake up to the smell of her coffee in the morning, never again see her wearing that old college sweatshirt while flipping channels on the couch. Those were memories now, pieces of a life we might have had Ryan not come along, or had she chosen a different path. But this was reality, and I was still breathing, still standing. I changed into comfortable clothes, sat on the floor, and leaned back against the bare wall. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled. I thought about how everything can seem so solid, houses, marriage, routine, but in an instant, it can turn to smoke. I felt the residue of anger, shame, sadness, all swirling together. Yet there was a flicker of relief in there too. I inhaled deeply, letting the cold, empty air of the apartment fill my lungs. This was my new start. No illusions, no whispered phone calls or half-lies about going to the gym. Just me, rebuilding from the rubble of a broken promise. Maybe this was a kind of victory, or maybe it was just survival. The next morning, I woke early, as if my body sensed a turning point. I brewed coffee in the small kitchenette, drank it without sugar, took a brisk shower in the cramped bathroom. I felt an odd clarity, like the silence around me gave me permission to feel all the pain, yet also to see a path beyond it. I visited my lawyer later that week, initiated the custody process. I told him I wanted fairness, but that I also wouldn't back down from protecting my rights as a father. He admired my composure, said I was handling it better than most men he'd seen in similar situations. I didn't know if that was true, or if I was just too numb to show how broken I felt. Either way, I signed papers, answered questions, then drove back to work, forcing my life to keep marching on. Meanwhile, a strange rumor trickled back to me through mutual acquaintances that Ryan was bragging about how he'd saved her from an unhappy marriage, how he was the hero in her story. I didn't let it rattle me. If anything, it fueled my quiet resolve. Let him think he's won. Let him think he's the alpha male. All I knew was that I had my dignity and a future without her lies. She was now his responsibility to handle. In the coming weeks, the final blow of closure landed in the form of a text from her. A simple line: "We should file for divorce soon." I read it 3 times, letting each word sink in. It hurt, but it also felt inevitable. I typed back, "Agreed. Let's do this right, for our son." A few days later, she arranged for me to pick him up for the weekend. I arrived at the house, soon to be her house alone. And she opened the door with our little boy in her arms. He reached for me, and my heart swelled with gratitude that I still got to hold him. She handed me his diaper bag, some extra clothes. We made polite small talk, 2 near strangers with a child in common. She didn't mention Ryan, and I didn't ask. All that mattered was our son and my chance to be a father. As I buckled him into the car seat, I caught a glimpse of her standing in the doorway. Maybe she expected me to say something. Maybe she wanted me to comfort her or lash out. But I simply nodded goodbye and drove away. My voice was gone again, replaced by the steady hum of the engine and the quiet presence of my boy. He was content, babbling, pointing at the passing cars. I knew that from now on, everything I did was for him, and for myself. No more illusions, no more chasing after a woman who felt no remorse. I spent the weekend learning to function as a single dad in my barely furnished apartment. We ate simple meals, played on the living room carpet with toy cars I'd hurriedly purchased, watched cartoons on a laptop. Every time I felt that pang of loss for what I used to have, I reminded myself that I wasn't losing my son. I was just losing a woman who wasn't who I thought she was. By Sunday night, after I dropped him back at her place, I returned to my empty apartment and found an odd sense of peace. Maybe it was the knowledge that I was still capable of loving, still capable of being a father, no matter how the shape of my family had changed. I put away the toys, folded the baby blanket, and sat on the floor with a weary sigh. It occurred to me that a few months ago, I would have done anything to fix my marriage. But seeing how far she'd gone with Ryan, how little regret she showed, it sealed my decision. Our story was over, replaced by a new one that was just beginning. In that new story, I was no longer a powerless man pinned down by betrayal and silence. I was a father, forging a path forward with quiet determination. The final, wrenching note of closure came in the form of her official petition for divorce. A stack of papers that spelled out the end of our marriage in cold, legal terms. I signed them with steady hands, returning them to my lawyer. The next day, I locked myself in my apartment and let out a long breath that felt like an exorcism of every lie, every betrayal, every painful scene replaying in my mind. In the hush that followed, I didn't scream or break down. I simply felt a wave of acceptance. She and Ryan could do as they pleased, but they would never have the part of me that mattered most, my capacity to love honestly, to remain true to the person I wanted to be. They could not crush my fatherhood, my dignity, or my future. I closed my eyes, recalling the last time I kissed that mirror in the bathroom, searching for a shred of genuine affection in a world gone cold. Then I exhaled and realized I no longer needed to do that. I had faced the lie and chosen to walk away. And in this new quiet space, I felt a small, resolute fire spark inside my chest. It was the ember of something I thought I'd lost. A sense of worth, of self, of possibility. Even in the cold, emptiness is still an emotion, and it reminds you you're alive. If you can feel the chill, it means you're not numb. And if you're not numb, you can still hope, still dream, still rebuild. I let that knowledge settle in me like a slow-rising warmth. And so I sat there, in my apartment with bare walls and minimal furniture, listening to the hum of the city outside. My son's laughter still echoed in my ears from the weekend we spent together. My heart was bruised, my pride battered, but something stronger had emerged from the wreckage. A quiet acceptance, an unspoken promise to myself. I would go on. I would be a better man, a better father, freed from the lies that once defined my life. The final edge of that realization felt both painful and liberating. Betrayal had scared me, yes, but it had also set me free. The once crippling heartbreak now hardened into a silent resolve, a vow to keep moving forward. And so, I did exactly that. With no dramatic declarations, no elaborate farewells, just a quiet man in a quiet room, letting the last vestiges of a broken marriage fall away like leaves in autumn, making space for something new to grow. I closed my eyes, exhaled, and allowed a faint, genuine smile to form. For the first time, in a long while, I felt myself, and I felt alive.